This is VOA Africa. Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory in for Hashtag of the US. It's Monday, August the 19th. This is Africa 54. Sudanese citizens celebrate signing of a political agreement after months of pro-democracy protests and violence. Chinese telecom giant Huawei installs cameras across Uganda's capital, raising suspicions and mixed reactions. And South Sudanese NBA star Luol Deng uses what he learned on the court to support South Sudanese youth and bring them hope. Sudan's military leadership council and pro-democracy parties have formally inked a political transition agreement leading to democratic elections. Although many protesters are worried of the compromises made in the deal, the signing was marked by celebrations across the capital. Isha Sarai and Naba Mohideen report from Khartoum.
The signing of Sudan's political agreement over the weekend was met with music and chanting.
I'm so happy I can't express it. A new Sudan will be built. It's really a beautiful thing. Our lives are going to be changed.
Celebrations throughout the capital lasted all day, though the signing itself was brief. Among those celebrating were thousands of people who traveled 300 kilometers from Atbara, which was the first city to protest for the ouster of former President Omar al-Bashir.
We came here to express our victory, to carry the memories and ambitions of the Sudanese people. We came to witness the final signing and witness the fulfillment of the demands of the revolution.
Those passengers were welcomed by hundreds of Khartoum residents who said the support of Atbara residents was instrumental during the protests earlier this year.
So now here we are today, waiting for this train again to it's to celebrate the success of the Sudanese revolution.
Celebrations throughout Khartoum followed the signing of the agreement after months of protests and negotiations. But some protesters worry the military will still retain too much power.
We've been through a very tough time. When the revolution erupted in December, the protests were not that big, but gradually they grew to this. So it's huge for us, despite the fact that we still have demands. We are still looking for some missing persons. There have been huge efforts, but we hope the new government will make finding them a priority.
Protesters have also expressed concern that those responsible for the killing of hundreds of demonstrators will not be punished and may even be named to the government this week. But for now, the Sudanese people are celebrating the outcome of months of civil unrest. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Khartoum.
For more perspective on the significance of the Sudan political agreement, joining me today is Niamat Ahmad, founder of the Darfur Women Action Group. Ms. Ahmad, welcome to Africa 54 once again.
Thank you.
Now, there are celebrations all over Khartoum over the weekend, but we are still hearing that there are people who are not necessarily celebrating. Why?
Well, as you know, the realities on the ground in Sudan are not celebratory at all. Talking about the historical grievances, the long-standing crisis in Darfur, there are over 3 million people who are genocide victims still out of their homes. People in Nuba Mountain, the Blue Nile, and including people who have lost their life or wounded throughout the 6 months of the protest in Khartoum. They are yet to find justice, and that is, I think it is a very long way to go.
Of course, a long way to go. But someone would say this is hope. At least this has ended in a peaceful way, and there's going to be a government that is bringing in civilians, although there will be also military people in it.
We always have hope, and but it is not. The problems are not solved by telling people to have hope. There has to be steps. And it has to start right. For example, I will make a very important example, like say the future of Sudan is a newborn child. And you tell me the health of the mother is not a priority as long as there is going to be a job. So it is very important that at this stage, this interim arrangement to start right, so that we can guarantee that every upcoming step can go right.
So what is it you want to see happen today in order to give you hope that things will go well tomorrow?
Well, the agreement first has given the military the leadership of the first interim agreement. You know how agreements are made in Sudan and how they are violated. And these two guys are not trustworthy. Everyone knows that they are close associates of Bashir. And when Bashir committed genocide in Darfur, they are his men down there executing the genocide and still continue to commit atrocities.
These people are holding Bashir accountable. He's been held today. He was actually in a cage in court. Isn't that a testimony that actually they're not necessarily staying loyal to him, but they're being loyal to the people of Sudan?
Well, I don't think that if they are being loyal to the people of Sudan, this is a rush trial. I think right now we don't even have a government in place. So trying Bashir for $90,000, it doesn't make any sense. Al-Bashir has 2 pending arrest warrants against him for the genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity that is committed against the people of Darfur. To build trust and show the people of Sudan that you are loyal to them, hand Bashir over to the International Criminal Court and then let the corruption trial come later.
Yeah, but let's say this. I've seen so many people celebrating on the streets. Could you be in the minority of those who are not warming up to this agreement? I mean, it's an agreement, a beginning for a journey that may take long.
Well, around the Friendship Palace, of course, people are celebratory. But how many million Sudanese? Sudanese are like over 30 million. Yeah. You tell me about 200 people around that.
Way saying,
so it's not representative.
So are you saying that this agreement does not give you hope for a brighter Sudan tomorrow?
I don't think the agreement is going to give me that hope because we needed to see more. Okay. It's too little and
we'll
too
be
late.
Watching, and maybe we'll call you over to see what you think of it. And we thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks a lot. Hold on there. That's Niamat Ahmad, who is the founder of the Darfur Women Action Group. Now, lawmakers in United States have long been wary of Chinese telecom giant Huawei. They say the corporation is unlike most tech companies because it effectively acts as a spying tool for Beijing. Recently, Huawei installed security cameras around Uganda's capital. Viewers Rasha Rubasadi has more in this report, narrated by Jeff Caster.
On the streets of Uganda's capital, Big Brother is watching.
Our manpower, especially in as far as the forensic investigators is concerned, is still wanting. It is still wanting, and unfortunately, it is majorly concentrated around town.
Chinese telecom giant Huawei recently installed a closed-circuit television system in Kampala that police say will reduce a recent uptick in violent crime. This $126 million system, equipped with facial recognition technology, keeps an unblinking eye on the streets below, all legal and authorized by Uganda's president. Security analyst Will Carter says it has tremendous potential to be abused.
So in many ways it depends on who's using it and how they choose to use it, and what kinds of governance structures are in place to protect people. But it also depends on how that technology is built and implemented and how the vendors actually deploy it. So Huawei is responsible to some degree for who they sell this to and how they build it.
Popular performer and parliamentarian Bobby Wine is a frequent government critic who says Uganda's cyber surveillance unit set out to hack him after he was arrested in 2018 and charged with treason. Wine said he was tortured in prison and after seeking treatment in the United States returned to Uganda. A Wall Street Journal report quotes a senior officer in the cyber surveillance unit who says Huawei technicians in Kampala hacked Wine's WhatsApp account. Authorities interfered with street rallies Wine organized and arrested him and dozens of his supporters. Reaction to CCTV monitoring is mixed.
They should be used for the right purpose, not any other thing. But as of now, I think they are being used for because we've seen a few cases that have been brought up because of these CCTV cameras. But I think they need to be used even more, and more should be even installed.
It's a military government. They're not really up to giving out power just like that. So they have to protect themselves. And one of the ways that they could do that it's easy to track you as an individual where they are not through using cameras.
You cannot ignore the complicity of the local authorities, who I suspect are the ones who are actually engaged in the abuses. But I think there's also a very strong argument to be made that Huawei knows that a lot of their customers are going to engage in this activity, and if they provide this capability, it's going to be abused. I really do think that in that sense, they are very culpable and complicit for these abuses when they happen.
Huawei says it does not engage in hacking and complies with local laws and regulations. The company says it has so far installed camera systems in 700 cities across more than 100 countries. For Rosh Erbasadi, this is Jeff Custer, VOA News, Washington.
Well, to the south of the continent, in a major show of force, hundreds of Zimbabwean police backed by soldiers and army helicopters were deployed in the country's second city, stopping the main opposition party from launching an anti-government protest march for the second time in 4 days. The street march in Bulawayo was organized by the Movement for Democratic Change Party as it looks to rally nationwide support against the government of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The MDC accuses the government of repression and blames it for the country's worst economic crisis in a decade. The government banned the Sunday demonstration. A magistrate on Monday adjourned the party's appeal against that decision until 4 p.m. local time, when the protest had been due to end. Now, authorities clamped down on a similar gathering on Friday in Harare. Well, for more on the Zimbabwe protests, journalist Columbus Mavunga joins me live via phone from Harare. Good evening, Columbus.
Good evening.
Now, what are you hearing from Bulawayo? Was there any level of success in the MDC's planned protests?
The opposition is saying they failed to take off. They are saying that there is too much interference from the state security officials. So they are hoping that come Tuesday they are going to another city which is in the Midlands. That's in Gweru, where they are hoping to protest there over the economic decline which has been happening over the past years.
Now, because it appears that the courts are agreeing with the government, but opposition had said that they will use different tactics. What are some of the tactics they think they could use to avoid the high-handedness of the government?
They are saying they are going to employ what they are calling non-confrontational way to protest. They are keeping that to the card to their chest, but they are saying there are going to be more protests. They're going to move away from the conventional way they get into the streets and get bashed. So they are saying they are grouping, they are putting their strategies together and hoping that they will succeed in getting the international attention to call President Emmerson Mnangagwa to address the moribund economy.
Very quickly, does the government actually acknowledge that the government is going through difficult times and that citizens have a legitimate reason to protest?
Yes, the government is saying, yes, the economy is not doing well. They're saying the administration of Mnangagwa, which came into power in November 2017, needs time to put things in order. If there are protests, they are saying that will result in looting, lost non-productive productive hours. So that would mean the situation will actually get worse. So, yeah.
Well, Columbus, thank you very much for your reporting. That's Columbus Mavunga reporting live via phone from Harare in Zimbabwe. Now, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. Please watch and share, show your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, more troubles for migrants trying to reach Europe by crossing the Mediterranean Sea.
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today, we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Well, this year marks the 400th anniversary since the first enslaved Africans set foot in what is now the United States. The arrival in the British colony of Virginia in August 1619 of a ship carrying Africans from Angola marked the tragic start of more than 200 years of slavery in America. VOA's Myra D. Lazaleta and Betty Ayub traveled to Angola to learn more about one of the origins of the transatlantic slave trade and its lingering impact on the region. Myra De La Salette narrates their report.
In 1619, a European ship landed in colonial Virginia with an unexpected cargo. At least 20 enslaved Africans, the first in America. These captives, from what is now the country of Angola, had survived a treacherous Atlantic crossing, only to face more suffering, a fate shared by hundreds of thousands of other enslaved Africans in what became the United States. Records of the sale and shipment of Africans appear in many ledgers, telling a horror story of upheaval and exploitation. At Angola's National Museum of Slavery in Luanda, Director Vladimir Fortuna says the slave trade's legacy still haunts the country.
For almost 4 centuries, this country, this region that we know today as Angola, was heavily involved in these activities, and this country was harmed in every single aspect. The social fabric was destroyed, and today, we live with the consequences of slavery.
Centuries of colonial rule combined with slavery fostered conflicts in Africa that increased poverty and instability, Fortuna says.
The slave trade destabilized African societies. It wasn't possible during the times of slavery and colonization for African societies to reorganize their political and labor systems. And sometimes, people try to forget this part of the country's history. And that's why the National Museum of Slavery exists.
This small house and chapel overlooking the sea formed part of Luanda's slave trade. The beautiful view contrasts starkly with the deplorable experiences that happened here. In this building, captives were converted to Christianity before being sent to meet their fate as slaves in the New World. Through baptism, the Catholic Church stripped the captives of their African identity. Those who were detained in Angola were given Portuguese Christian names. They were baptized in big groups and were renamed if and when they reached a distant shore.
These people were baptized en masse.
Paulino Koteka is a priest in the coastal city of Benguela, south of Luanda.
In the past, the church and the state worked together, and the evangelization here in Angola served both the church and colonization, though that mix could be confusing.
Father Koteka says these conversions were both good and bad.
On one hand, it helped new converts embrace the gospel. On the other hand, it destroyed their identity and their culture. Many of them suffered because of this evangelization. That's why the church apologized later for these mistakes.
In 1985, Pope John Paul II asked Africans to forgive white Christians for their involvement in the slave trade. The Kwanza River, which empties into the Atlantic just south of Luanda, was an important trade route, and people who lived near its banks got swept up in the slave trade.
It was by the river where most of the slaves were captured. They were kidnapped, and it was done by the Africans as middlemen.
Hurd says slavery drained the region of precious human capital.
The workforce, the intelligentsia, the skilled people were taken from here. And today, we need this skilled workforce so that Africa can move forward to a better situation.
Portugal officially banned slave trafficking in 1836. But Angola is still trying to recover from its legacy. Maida de la Salette with Betty Ayub, VOA News, in Luanda, Angola.
Well, the first African captives came from the Portuguese colony of Angola, brought to the shores of Virginia in 1619 by an English pirate ship that had seized them from a Portuguese slave ship. Some 6 million enslaved Africans came from Angola, most of them sent to Portugal's colonies, but some ended up in North America. Be sure to join Africa 54 tomorrow when we learn more about Angola's fierce resistance to the slave trade. Now, several frantic migrants jumped off their Spanish rescue boat into the Mediterranean Sunday as the open arms vessel desperately looked for a safe port. The migrants leaped into the sea and started swimming towards Italy's Lampedusa island. Open Arms crew members jumped in after them and brought them back on board. The Open Arms has been at sea for 17 days with 107 migrant passengers. The boat is now anchored off Lampedusa as Italy's hardline Interior Minister Matteo Salvini refuses to let the ship dock. Under international law, a troubled ship at sea is supposed to be allowed to dock at the nearest safe port. Spain offered the Open Arms permission to dock at the port of Algeciras near Gibraltar, but the vessel rejected the offer, saying it would be at least a 6-day journey. Spain then said Open Arms could dock at the nearest Spanish port, but the ship has yet to reply to the second offer. Now, nearly 18 months ago, U.S. President Donald Trump famously tweeted that trade wars are good and easy to win. But shortly after he announced another 10% increase in tariffs on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods, global stock markets plummeted and economists warned of a looming recession. Trump's top trade official and a Democratic presidential hopeful shared their views Sunday on the American television network ABC. Here's VOA's Arash Arabasadi.
Economists warn that a recession may be coming. In August, stock markets in the United States suffered their worst losses of the year before a slight rebound this past week. At the center of it all, President Donald Trump's trade war with China. Sunday on ABC's This Week, the president's top trade official, Peter Navarro, said the economy would be fine.
So we're going to have a strong economy through 2020 and beyond with a bull market, and here's why. If Congress rises above partisan politics, we should have passage of the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement. This is, without hyperbole, the largest trade deal ever in history. It's also going to give us hundreds of thousands of more jobs.
Democratic Senator and presidential hopeful Kirsten Gillibrand said the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal is a bad one.
I think NAFTA 2.0 is a disaster. I think it was a giveaway to drug companies in Mexico. It's going to harm our jobs. President Trump said no bad trade deals. Not only has he entered into them, but he started a trade war with China, and it's really harming producers.
China's Commerce Ministry told his country's firms to stop buying American agricultural products after the president threatened a 10% tariff on $300 billion worth of goods.
What the president did was looked at that, and as of September 1st, about half of that will be tariffed at 10%. One of the things the president does beautifully is engage with the business community, labor leaders, and everybody in between.
I don't think his worldview is reflected in the everyday kitchen table issues that families are facing. They're worried about their jobs, they're worried about access to health care, they're worried about providing for their kids.
The United States right now has the hottest economy anywhere in the world.
Despite non-stop claims that Beijing bears the financial brunt, President Trump recently delayed imposing some of the latest tariffs on Chinese goods until after the holiday shopping season in December. The U.S.-China trade war seems even to have derailed the United States' usual support of pro-democracy uprisings like those currently taking place in Hong Kong, and on which the U.S. has been largely silent. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
NBA star Luol Deng and his family fled Sudan's civil war when he was a child from what would later become South Sudan. Deng now uses what he learned on the court to support South Sudanese youth and bring them hope. Sheila Pony has more from Juba.
Former NBA player Luol Deng this month visited the land of his birth, present-day South Sudan, to encourage young players.
And it's also a tool to take kids, off the streets, but also occupy them with teamwork, teach them, how to work together, how to communicate. It's really more than a sport.
As a child, Deng fled Sudan's civil war with his family to Egypt, where he met Sudanese former NBA center Manute Bol, who taught him to play basketball. The Luol Deng Foundation in 2015 opened the Manute Bol Court in Juba in memory of Bol, who died in 2010. The foundation works with the United Nations Refugee Agency and NBA Africa to build outdoor basketball courts that bring community together. The courts and Deng's example inspire young South Sudanese players.
There are some players getting a scholarship like to Europe, America, because of the game they're playing.
But the Luol Deng Foundation is about more than just basketball.
We do a lot of other things. For example, we have 10 doctors that we send every year. We've been doing it for 5 years now. They perform surgeries all over South Sudan.
The Minister of Youth and Sport for Jubek State says Deng's charity work is invaluable.
What Luol is doing actually is very great and appreciated, because it's bringing hope for our youth and the teenagers.
Deng joined the NBA in 2004 with the Chicago Bulls, last played for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and is a two-time NBA All-Star. Deng's next plan for South Sudan is to build a basketball academy and to include more girls.